Kia ora and welcome to the Niggly Niche Cast. I'm the Diggity Doodah Doc, Mr. Peptoy Panther, Mr. Slippers, with a special little edition of the Christmas Slippers, here to talk a Boxing Day test over in Melbourne. Stinky, smoggy, yucky, Australian Melbourne, but the Blackcaps are there to play Boxing Day cricket, so it's all good, baby, and we are here with the wobbly wildcard to preview the second test between the Blackcaps and the Aussies wildcard. What's your Christmas vibe right now? How are you feeling just with the Christmas atmosphere, all that good stuff? Just tell me, what's your Christmas vibe?
Ooh, I would say well poised currently. I done all my shopping. I've done all that sort of stuff, all sorted. Christmas Eve, of course, you got to be better planned than that. And I left it pretty late this year, later than I normally do. I normally just be a smartass and get everything like at the end of November ordered online, and it turns up almost already wrapped for me. Just got to apply a little bit of Christmas paper, but I don't know. I think I'm pretty well set at this point. So I'm just a matter of waiting out the hours, and a podcast is a nice way to get through that.
It definitely is. Although like the whole idea of Christmas and having to spend money and buy people shit, that every time Christmas,
the commercialism,
every time Christmas comes around, it's just like, what? So this is what it's about, buying shit for other people. Like, I would just much prefer everyone just went all in on, making Christmas just about the vibe, the atmosphere, the people, the feeling, instead of having to spend all this money. And we're all sucked into that cycle, like, because you look around and everyone's just whipped into the same frenzy. Like, I got to go shopping, I got to go spend money, or I need to spend this amount of money, I need to do this for this person, I need to buy this, and then I got to get this done. And it's all just like it's fucking, we're in a whirlwind, and we kind of forget the essence of what it's all about, if you get my drift.
And that never slaps you in the face more than if you go to the shops in the week out from Christmas, and suddenly it's just like a complete wake-up call of, what am I doing with my life to be put in this situation where I have to drive 15-20 minutes just to get a car park, circling around like a shark, and all these people just cram through, and the long ass waits at the lines, and is this really worth it? Is this really the point of what I'm trying to get at here? I don't know, probably not, but I mean, it's nice to be able to gift people stuff, I guess. It's just perhaps it doesn't have to be, maybe the gift isn't as meaningful if it's just $30 from the warehouse. Maybe there are better ways to do that.
Oh, definitely do anytime you got to go do your shopping, you got to do it before 11 a.m. That's my trick. Just get out there, first in line.
Before the 11th of December, ideally.
Or for me, that kind of ruins the whole buzz. You're too prepared. If you're going to partake in the capitalism, commercialism, whatever you want to call it, you got to at least have a bit of Christmas vibration sprinkled on top, and that's the atmosphere.
Yeah, fair call.
But none of that atmosphere is present when you're driving around looking for a park and you're wiggling through aisles and all that bullshit. But we do have some Blackcaps funk wildcard, because Tom Blundell, the Wellington Firebirds wicketkeeper batsman who tends to bat in the middle order pretty much throughout his whole career for the Wellington Firebirds, is going to open for the Blackcaps test team on a Boxing Day test in Australia, against Mitchell Starc, against Pat Cummins, probably James Pattinson. Just a collection of, some of the world's best seam swing bowlers that, maybe it's perfect for Tom Blundell because he doesn't have to face Josh Hazlewood. No Josh Hazlewood, but James Pattinson's record in Australia, I think before the series I took a gaze at it, was early 20s. So suddenly we have this situation where a middle order batsman has been selected to open for the Blackcaps in a Boxing Day test. I wrote about it and explored a couple of different little wrinkles in it. So I just want to get your reaction to that news and just how you're feeling about Mr. Blundell, the opener for the Blackcaps.
Well, I'm not completely shocked. I mean, there was obviously a problem there that they had to do something about, and Jeet Raval just wasn't scoring any runs, and I think we both talked about this in the last podcast we did, last cricket one anyway, talking about like, well, they've backed themselves into a corner with poor selection, so they pretty much just got to see it out with Jeet Raval and say, well, this is his job. Like, this is what he's in the team to do. We'll back him to at least, you know, let's just hope he can figure something out and get us, even if it's just a 20 or 30, a start, or just something to get the innings going. But obviously they figure he's in too bad of a state to be able to perform, and I guess if you come to the conclusion where you're like, is this guy who's never come even close, never even been considered in his wildest dreams or in anyone's wildest dreams, in Gary Stead's wildest dreams. I don't think those... somehow I don't think Gary Stead's wildest dreams are actually that wild. But anyway, like, as a test match opener, it's never even been on the horizon before. If they decide that he can do as good a job in this individual test, or it's probably going to be 2 individual tests, I suppose. I doubt they're going to call up someone else between now and then, or you do it already now when he had the big break. So I guess he's going to get 2 tests to open the batting. And if you can say, well, over the course of these 4 innings, we think Blundell can do easily as good a job as Jeet Raval, then I guess there's a logical reason to pull the trigger on that then. But I'm skeptical. I'm skeptical for 2 reasons. One is that Tom Blundell, like, even ignoring about it, pretend this is a home test against Sri Lanka kind of thing, like, ignoring the thing about being away to Australia, probably the toughest place to play test cricket as an opener, when, you know, you're going to be getting some fast bowling coming straight at you and hoofing around a little bit as well in Melbourne. Like, yeah, ignore all that thing and just say Tom Blundell, would he make the test team as a batsman? So therefore, should he be considered as like the next batsman in the thing? And this comes back to what we were talking about last time about just poor selection, backing them into a corner. And the other one is, and I actually don't know this, but like, what's his tendency of opening in first class cricket? Has he ever opened at any like reasonable comparative level? I'm not sure if he has. If he has at some point, it's not been a regular thing. So, like, probably not good. I mean, he's got a first-class average of about 37 or something like that, which is not terrible at all. But I don't think that's going to get you into the test team as a batsman. I don't think he's got enough experience to be considered as an opener. So it's all just really a sad situation where they didn't think ahead and pick accordingly, considering Jeet Raval's extended run slump. It's not just been like the England series and this series. He didn't score runs in Sri Lanka. He scored 100 against Bangladesh last year, but other than that, like, that was just clouding what on either side of that big knock was a otherwise poor summer from him. Like, and to not think ahead, to not plan ahead to that point where you had any kind of batting cover, and not even just any batting cover, literally any batting cover, not just opening cover, which is a specialist position as well. It's all just a sad situation for the Blackcaps to back themselves into this corner. But yeah, I guess if they figure that Blundell can do it as well as Raval, then you might as well, because at least it takes the pressure off Raval, who's been left in an otherwise very awkward situation, just obviously a mile out of form and just struggling. So I can understand it from that point of view, but it all comes back to decisions that were made several weeks ago and picking a squad for 2 series without giving yourself room for adjustment like that. And yeah, that's where the problem lies. It's the same as what we were talking about last week. The fact they've made a different decision doesn't change the fact that this is all just like avoidable fallout from a decision that a poor decision made a while back.
There are definitely some there's very little evidence to suggest that Tom Blundell should be opening for the Blackcaps, and it's not just opening. You're opening, like, I keep saying this because it's fucking ridiculous. You're opening on Boxing Day in Australia, which, like, can you imagine if the Blackcaps are batting first, Tom Blundell is walking out for the opening, like, stanza of this Boxing Day test that has been, like, built up to a neck level, and it's just Mr. Blundell.
Presumably he'd be facing the first ball too, because Tom Latham normally, Jeet Raval normally gets the first ball. Tom Latham's average, and one of those weird things, it's like I think Martin Guptill's the same in ODI. Is one of those weird things where Latham's average is considerably better when he's at the non-strikers end for the first ball. So presumably Blundell would get to face the first ball of the match as well.
Yeah, even more crazy. So I'm saying there's very little reason or evidence to make this move. But what Blundell has done is he has scored runs in the tier below kind of Blackcaps Test cricket or even Blackcaps cricket. Now, if you go onto Blundell's Cricinfo page, they show the last 10 innings. So this is an issue because basically all of these opportunities came in Blundell's last 10 innings, which means he hasn't played any fucking cricket. Like, if we're going back to the New Zealand versus Australia series, one-day series before arriving in England for the World Cup, that was in May. And Blundell, his 77 in that series, which was hyped up at that time. Remember that Blundell was almost going to play in the World Cup. A lot of people were talking about Blundell playing in the World Cup because of obvious issues with Colin Munro, for example. But that came because Blundell hit 77 against an Australian 11. Then he hit 106 versus the West Indies. So those are two pre-World Cup warm-up games / like New Zealand 11, New Zealand A type of games. So he scored runs in those two games. And he also scored a 60 for New Zealand Day against England only a couple of weeks ago. So at the very least, shout out to Tom Blundell. He's scored this, I think it was 59 or 57 against the Victorian 11. So at the very least, Tom Blundell has scored runs around the Blackcaps, which if I put myself in the Blackcaps shoes, I'm seeing this guy that we're carrying in our squad everywhere as one of the next in line wicketkeeper batsmen, and he has some talent to suggest that he could be a decent, international batsman. He does have a test match century after all. So if I'm in the Blackcaps position, I'm thinking like this guy is scoring runs around this environment. Not many other cricketers in New Zealand, whenever they step up to that next level above domestic cricket, are they scoring runs as Tom Blundell has done. So that is good for him. But then even the Victoria, if we're basing this decision off what he did against Victoria 11, well, that Victoria 11 doesn't really feature any straight up and down established Sheffield Shield cricketers because the best players are playing Big Bash cricket, let alone the fact that I think there were 5 or 6 wickets or 5 or 6 batsmen, New Zealand batsmen who batted and then left the crease. 4 of those batsmen, I think 2 were dismissed. So 4 of them retired and just let other people bat. So it was basically a piss take. So we can't really judge Tom Blundell's run scoring in a piss take situation. So it's a bit of a kerfuffle. I can see how they've got to this point. I can see how they could rationalize this decision. Ultimately, we're both kind of pretty much essentially, generally, basically saying that this situation, this position should never have been arrived at in the first place. And perhaps the Blackcaps should have been better prepared for this situation. But now we have Tom Blundell opening. And I don't know what it says about the pathway to Blackcaps batsmen or Blackcaps call-ups for batsmen. There's a bunch of other batsmen who are better just straight up and down batsmen than Tom Blundell, who are now behind Tom Blundell. It's just a very weird, kind of messy little situation.
What I don't understand is, is there some ICC rule that you can't just call up another player into the squad when, without there being an injury or something like that? Is there a reason why they can't just give a phone call to, there's no standout option for the next opener spot, but, surely just in it's not, yeah, again, it's not quite one off, but for 2 tests, for a short term stopgap option, surely like Martin Guptill or Hamish Rutherford or George Worker would be a better fit though. Like, is there a reason they can't just call someone else up at this point? It's just, it's very weird to me because they've had that break. Like, there's a more than a week between the first test and the second test. If ever there was an opportunity to make that call, which, to be honest, like, it should have been made before the series, and you should have had someone already over there, and this is all, like, the fault of the selectors for not thinking this way, and, like, all these little permutations and the tricks about Blundell's form, and how's all this going to fit in, and, can he be successful? Like, I mean, it might come back to that idea, can he be successful, but all of this is fallout from a sloppy decision earlier. But, like, is there actually something stopping them from just calling someone else up? Because surely that would be a better option.
I don't believe so. I think those kind of rules and regulations are only present in tournaments, like ICC tournaments. Otherwise, it's basically how many people you can afford to bring on tour with you. Like,
and so it might be a cash thing.
And fly over. So I think the only restriction is how much money you're willing to spend.
Well, Martin Guptill should go and find a club team in Victoria to play for this weekend. He should fly over of his own, I'm sure he can afford a ticket to Australia. Go have Christmas in Australia, bring the family with him, sort of thing. And just happen to be playing club cricket, like, down the road from the MCG or something like that, He should have thought a little bit ahead of this. You know how, like...
Whoa. Why would Martin Guptill want to leave New Zealand? He's just chilling playing Super Smash. Like, he doesn't give a shit. He gets Christmas at home. He gets the holiday period at home. He's got young babies. Like, he doesn't give a shit about this.
Well, I'm just saying, if he ever wanted to resurrect his test career, here's the perfect backdoor entry sort of option for him. But no, I suppose maybe he's fine with all that. He's just put it in the back door and living his best life right now, so he might be fine. Yeah, Super Smash. It is kind of his time to shine, I suppose. I mean,
like,
top order.
I agree with you that Martin Guptill is someone you can inject in for a brief kind of little stint against a very good Australian team. The other bloke is Greg Hay. Now, I view Greg Hay as the perfect person for this scenario, because this is a bloke who is 35 years old, opens the innings for Central District Stags, averages 42 in first-class cricket, and we're not looking at Greg Hay as like a long-term solution. We're looking at Greg Hay as someone who has earned his stripes and deserves an opportunity for a test, 2 tests. Now, I threw up those scenarios when Jet Raval and Tom Latham were both scoring runs, and it was like, well, if for whatever reason Jet Raval or Tom Latham's injured or unavailable, who is the best person to put in for 1 test or 2 tests when that opening spot opens up? It's Greg Hay, because he's experienced and he's got a fantastic record in the position, in the format that he is going to be doing possibly in international cricket. He is the perfect person to just call up for a test here, a test there, and pretty much this exact scenario, because you give Greg Hay an opportunity, you let Jet Raval go back to domestic cricket, find some confidence, find some form, and then it's kind of a natural transition, a natural rotation. If Greg Hay doesn't quite take his opportunity, Jet Raval finds some form, finds some confidence, comes back in. If Greg Hay takes his opportunity with open arms, well, then it's his until he gives it up. But, like, we have someone in New Zealand who is fantastic at this role, has experience, and can just be injected in and just see what happens. Whether it's Greg Hay, who I think is the best candidate for that specific role, or other people like Martin Guptill. George Worker's not so much a good long format batsman. He's a fantastic white ball batsman. Doesn't quite have the record to fill me with confidence that he can be in that realm. Even if it's just chucking Hamish Rutherford in, maybe it's chucking someone else like Tom Bruce, who is, in my opinion, the best kind of all-round batsman in New Zealand at the moment. there's no shortage of good batsmen in New Zealand, that's for sure. Like, there's guys scoring runs in domestic cricket, but it's a wicket-keeper batsman, middle-order batsman who is already there who gets the opportunity. So, it's, yeah.
Having said that, like, Blundell is the guy it's going to be, and Blundell, like, he scored 100 on Test debut. It was a very good innings. He's another one of those wicket-keepers who bats like a wicket-keeper. You know, he's got a slightly odd, just a slightly unorthodox technique, which doesn't fill me with massive confidence to be a Test match opener, particularly against Australia away on Boxing Day, possibly facing the first ball. But, like, 100 on debut shows that he, like, in an individual innings, a guy could just get a mixture of lucky and extremely determined and just battle away, and, you know, you can make something of that, which maybe wouldn't be a long-term trend. Like, I don't think anyone believes that Tom Blundell can be a long-term opener for New Zealand. Maybe he'll even get that opportunity if he does well here, but, like, I don't think it would last for the rest of his Test career, certainly. Like, but he has shown that ability to be able to, like, knuckle down and make the most of a singular opportunity. And, like, he's only played 2 Test matches before. He turned up in that first one. I can certainly picture a possibility in which he just, like, through sheer determination, like, just absolute force of mind and this kind of thing, can, like, manifest a strong innings, just like backs against the wall sort of thing, where he can just, like, hang in there and do something, get a 50 or something like that, and, you know, impress a few people and help set up hopefully a Blackcaps Test match victory, which would be very nice. But yeah, like, I don't see it happening long term, but I can see him in that individual short term sense doing something like that, because he does have a little bit of form in terms of that kind, like, past experience of doing that kind of thing as well. You know, 100 on Test debut is nothing to be scoffed at. It's pretty rare. So, like, regardless of the fact that it was at home, I think against the West Indies, different circumstances, but that same mentality shows that he is at least a guy who they can trust to not just come in and be completely out of his depth and throw his wicket away. You know, he'll do as much as he possibly can within the realms of his abilities. So he's not a terrible stopgap in that sense of the word. I can see a way in which he can make this at least semi-useful, at least in this one-off individual kind of Test situation.
And it's something that needs to be said about how we, like, assess what has happened. Like, when we go through previous performances to try and make sense of stuff, Tom Blundell scored a century on debut as the Blackcaps put up 520 against the West Indies. Colin de Grandhomme hit 105 at a strike rate of 141. So, yeah, Tom Blundell hit a century on debut. He was also batting 8. So he's batting well down the order. West Indies have no idea who he is. Blackcaps are cruising. Everything's pretty solid. West Indies' bowling attack wasn't amazing. And Tom Blundell scored a century. Like, that's okay. There's nothing... scoring a century on debut isn't anything to be scoffed at, but as we've talked about and as we've seen throughout our time following cricket, the first innings might be the easiest, and then you've got to back it up as people become more familiar with you. And that goes across any sport as well. After the second test, Tom Blundell had scores of 28 and 1. So it's just convoluted. There's arguments either way. There's kind of bits and pieces that you can draw upon to make your case that Tom Blundell is the perfect man for the job. And to follow your argument, there's definitely instances throughout his time around the Blackcaps and what he's done that you can say, because of this and this, I am confident that Tom Blundell is going to do something in this test. But you can also point to this and this and that and say, still a bit sketchy. So it's just a very messy kind of situation. I did see someone say, like, Tom Blundell plays fast bowling very well. He's very good on the hook shot. The biggest test for Tom Blundell is going to be what he does outside his off stump, because just watching him score his runs in Plunket Shield cricket this season specifically, obviously the scorecards only show boundaries, so we're not seeing necessarily the struggles Tom Blundell's happening. I'm only watching the runs he is scoring, so keep that in mind as we kind of take this with a bit of a grain of salt, but very loose and fluid outside his off stump, which is what you would expect from a wicketkeeper batsman who tends to bat between, I think this season for Wellington he went up to number 4, but he's very much a middle order player and he's very attacking. He takes on the bowlers, and he does so with a bit of a loosey-goose style. He's a stroke player. He is going to be under the pump with deliveries outside his off stump. The ball's going to be moving either way. The Australian bowlers are going to be accurate. They're going to be hitting that off stump. Again, it's a very similar, I think, wildcard case to, like, oh, we're picking this bowler because he's tall and it's in Australia, so you got to be able to bowl bouncers. It's the same kind of basic analysis that doesn't do it justice, because Tom Blundell may not face too many short balls. Like, how he deals with the short ball may not even matter. What matters is how he deals with good deliveries on and around his off stump. And that is going to be his biggest issue, because the Australians are very good at doing that. A lot of the difference between the best teams in the world and the teams who aren't so consistently good is how many deliveries in an over, how many deliveries in a spell are you bowling where you want to bowl. Australia do that fantastically well. And then even if Tom Blundell sees off the new ball, he's going to have Nathan Lyon just serving up deliveries, landing in the exact same spot, sussing out a weakness and then exposing that weakness. Like, and that's why, like, you've got to have some sympathy for Jet Raval, not only because of how hard the job is of opening in Test cricket, but it wasn't easy for Jet Raval to be batting on that pitch over in Perth. Like, opening the batting against Australia is a very difficult task. And Tom Latham averages 26 versus Australia. So Tom Latham finds it a bit more difficult opening the batting against Australia than he does against other nations. So Tom Blundell is going to be severely, heavily, immensely tested, not in how tough he is, not in how even skillful he is, because it doesn't matter how skillful he is and how he hits boundaries. What matters is Tom Blundell's patience, Tom Blundell's accuracy in his decision making and his execution of shots, and the leave is a shot. So how is Tom Blundell going to, like, when you talk about batting and talk about, like, on a tactical level, Tom Blundell has to establish a zone in which he's not going to play deliveries. If he can establish that zone where the Australian bowlers aren't making him play, the Australian bowlers have to move closer to Tom Blundell and his hitting zone, and then he might be able to work them through the leg side and so on and so forth. But you have to be very skillful, clear, mentally strong in establishing that zone outside of your off stump where you're going to play or not play at deliveries. And that is their biggest question mark right now, is how a stroke player, a stroke maker in the middle order is going to deal with the challenge offered by the Australian bowlers. And once again, the challenge isn't how many deliveries can we bowl at your front armpit. The challenge is, what are you going to do outside your off stump when you've got a left armer swinging it back into you, pushing it across from you? You've got Pat Cummins moving the ball away from you from a right-hander angle, then pushing one back into you. James Pattinson tends to bowl traditional outswing at a bit more of a hostile pace. So you're going to fiddle at those deliveries outside off stump. So to kind of wrap up that point, if Tom Blundell were to be successful in a one-off innings, as you've alluded to, the leave is going to be a major weapon for Tom Blundell.
It'll be fun to watch one way or another. I'd be lying if I said I don't enjoy a bit of a novelty in sports every now and then. I think the other shot that would be quite useful for him if he does go on to get a half-decent score there, I think a shot he'd probably need to rely quite a lot on is, anything involving the outside edge, probably. He can just nudge a few through slips and that bounce just short, or, get a bit of luck that way, maybe over the top for 4 and those kind of things. Like, that always is a sign of a guy who's on his lucky day, if you can just, get away with the bad ones like that. It's the stuff on and outside off stump that's gonna get you, because it doesn't matter how good he might be at the short ball, because he's not going to face much of a short ball. It's the new ball, you're pitching it up, you're trying to swing it around a little bit, trying to see what you got. So it's just not going to be a factor for him in an innings like that. What I will say is, if he gets figured out by Nathan Lyon, he's done his job. That's fine. If he gets just completely worked out by a world-class off-spinner, no dramas whatsoever, because his job is to try and stop Kane Williamson and Ross Taylor from having to come in the most hostile conditions and facing that new ball. Ideally in the first 10 overs, better yet in the first 20 overs. So, whether he can do that is skeptical, and even if he does do that, whether Tom Latham can match that at the same time, whether they can actually make a partnership. They do have a nice little right-hand, left-hand thing going now, so they always say that's a bonus in terms of, just keeping bowlers off their line and constantly adjusting and things like that. It seems like just the style of player that Tom Blundell is, there's probably a likelihood that he gets out chopped onto his own stumps, but it's the same thing. You gotta ride a certain element of luck with a guy like this. What I can't get past, which every time I think about it, I think how silly this whole thing is how this looks from Australia's perspective. This whole big series that we've been planning for and really targeting, and then we come over and after one test we've got a wicketkeeper batsman who's used to batting in the middle order coming in to open, which he's never done in test matches, only played 2 tests, doesn't really have the technique for it, which again, in a one-off test, that doesn't necessarily mean he's going to fail. It means he will fail over long, extended opportunities, but he's not going to get those, so that's not the point. We just got to hope he gets one of those outliers within this short-term window that he's going to have to just do this job, because someone has to. But how this looks from Australia's perspective, it's not pretty. I got to think that they're just sitting back laughing, being like, really? You guys said you were going to come over here and beat us, and this was the best test team you've ever played, and one test match down, which we won thoroughly, and this is what you're up to now. I can't think it's a great look for the Blackcaps in terms of how the big brothers are viewing them.
When you were talking about that, I instantly just thought about Mitchell Starc and what he said to Jet Raval, and you think well, we're mentally disintegrating this guy, and now we are graced with this situation. I don't think they would have read what the Blackcaps are up to and said, if we can really break down Jet Raval in this test, then they are going to select Tom Blundell, and we can further that idea. They wouldn't have known how the Blackcaps would select their opening combination, but they had
the Blackcaps
bunny.
Didn't even know.
Yeah, they had a bunny in that first test in Jet Raval, and Mitchell Starc told him that, and now they have a what appears to be a bit of a bunny from their perspective in this test as well. So yeah, it's just a interesting situation, and as I wrote yesterday, and as you said earlier, like everything around it is fits snugly into the bucket of just weird Blackcaps shit. But as of right now, Tom Blundell's going to be the opener. It's just going to be a interesting viewing experience watching Tom Blundell go about his work in that arena on that bigger stage. Kind of regardless of how we got here. I think we can separate the two things in weird Blackcap shit and then the work of Tom Blundell in this test, which I think we're all kind of hoping for a miracle there. What else are you interested about with the Blackcaps coming into this test? Looks like Trent Bolt's going to be back in action, which one would suggest just means a bowling attack of Trent Bolt, Tim Southey, Neil Wagner, Colin de Grandhomme, Mitchell Santner. Todd Astle did get a bit of a bat in that game against Victoria, and old mate Craig McMillan chucks up some weird ideas, doesn't he? Like
don't get me started.
For someone who was around the Blackcaps as a batting coach, the shit he says, not necessarily in commentary, but as a noted cricket pundit on the media.
Yeah, on Twitter, on Radio Sport, those kind of, he said some stupid things recently, that actually kind of really annoyed me.
Well, what annoyed you?
Well, specifically his thing about like how Jeet Raval needs to be dropped because it's just cruel to him to keep him out there, and he sort of like tried to say it in a humane way, but I was like, this form slump has gone on for ages. Like, you were his batting coach for the majority of that time when he wasn't scoring runs and things weren't going well for him, and this is a long trend that's only just like, this didn't just happen. Like, we've been talking about this. This didn't just happen. And as soon as he's out of the batting coach thing, he's just throwing heat back on on Gary Stead as well, who's his former boss. I mean, I guess not the boss he spent most of his time there in that job with. That would have been Mike Hesson. But I don't know. Maybe there was a little bit of maybe he didn't want to step down as batting coach. Maybe there's some drama there that I'm projecting upon. But like to be so immediately critical once he comes out of that atmosphere is a bad look for me. Like I don't see what he achieves from doing that, because most of Jeet Raval's struggles you can't blame that on Peter Fulton. Peter Fulton inherited what Craig McMillan failed to fix. So Craig McMillan saying he should be dropped now. Well, was he saying that in team meetings beforehand? Was he saying this guy is struggling and we need to come up with someone else who can do this opening job because it isn't working? Like, was he saying that while he was his batting coach? I don't know, but Jeet Raval continued to play through all of those games, so Craig McMillan coming out now and throwing his weight around like that as a pundit is pretty dodgy. I don't particularly care for the optics of that one.
He also wanted Todd Astle coming in.
Of course he did, because they're both Cantabrian.
He talked to, like, he alluded to Mitchell Santner not being a good enough wicket taker option, and this is the same kind of narrative that we have discussed, but I would assume that someone who was in the Blackcaps would understand essentially what I've tried to outline to you, like about the mix and the balance and everything Santner does offer the Blackcaps team strictly in the confines of the strongest Blackcaps bowling attack. Mitchell Santner is the best complementary piece, and so for McMillan to just come out and basically the same with Raval, like, yeah, sure, we're not the same because he wasn't the bowling coach per se, but he's just like, for someone who was in the Brains Trust and understands, like, surely he must understand why Mitchell Santner is in that Blackcaps team better than you and I, and he's saying that Mitchell Santner, isn't quite good enough, and that Todd Astle's good enough, and it's just a very weird. He just doesn't stop with his weird shit.
No, I mean, This is part of why I didn't like. I mean, I immediately hated the idea of him coming back to the Sky Sport cricket commentary box because, like, you already had Mike Hesson, who's very good at giving you the kind of insight that only a person who's worked closely with these players can have, but without just being a dick, you know. And Craig McMillan isn't acting like that in his commentary stuff. But just to have someone else like that who's too close to the team, it's surely a conflict of interest when you got like that much of a balance. And Mike Hesson earns it, Craig McMillan doesn't. And then Craig McMillan goes on the radio and spurts controversial opinions, which, by the way, he's like, that's probably his best format as a pundit, is just being a guy who can do 10 minutes on talkback radio. I thankfully don't listen to talkback radio, but that's probably like the element at which he's in his best, because he can cut loose a little bit. But to be doing that, like openly criticizing people that you worked with very recently, is strange to me. Like, strange on a few different ways. Strange for like the professional sense of things, because surely he was involved in all these conversations previously, but also strange on a personal sense, because like we've seen with the way Hesson does things, like he's still mates with all these dudes. He keeps in contact with a lot of them, I got to assume. Like, it's just Craig McMillan just want to burn some bridges? I don't know. Or maybe he's just the world's biggest Todd Astle fan, and he's the reason that Todd Astle keeps being selected in squads without ever actually playing.
Well, you're very outlandish with your disdain. Like, we're both from Auckland, so we both think and feel the same. But you're very outlandish with your anti-Canterbury stuff, because
it's not anti-Canterbury. It's just that Cantabrians are very good at supporting each other in sports. It happens quite regularly in a lot of different sports, and it's a very good thing. It's it's a reason why Canterbury's always punching above their weight, like in terms of population basis, and just dominating a lot of sports. But it's not like, it's also Gary Stead, for example, coached Canterbury for a long time, so it's not just like that. It's also personal relationships that he has. That
was my point.
Out a few different ways.
This is my point, is that you pointed out Craig McMillan's bias towards Canterbury, but then like juxtaposed against that, you've got Gary Stead, who's from Canterbury, who appears to be doing let me put it this way. He is either doing a great job in terms of being the Blackcaps coach, and if you're the Blackcaps coach, you've got to take everyone equally. You got to kind of just destroy that bias. Like, if you're the Blackcaps coach, you're there for the betterment of New Zealand cricket. And I believe a lot of coaches have done a great job of that, regardless of where they're from in New Zealand, as you would expect. What I would also suggest is that maybe the influence of Kane Williamson overrides the influence of Gary Stead. So we've talked about that previously as well with a few selections. I think the Blackcaps Brains Trust revolves heavily around Kane Williamson and Ross Taylor, and maybe this is just my feel, maybe less of like a Gary Stead dictatorship type of thing. I think Gary Stead may be doing a great job at integrating with the Brains Trust of Kane Williamson and Ross Taylor. He
certainly doesn't strike you as a dictator, eh? He seems much more of a facilitator type of coach, Gary Stead does.
Correct. We do try to operate on the positive vibration more so than the negative or the critical. It's just hard when you're getting so much weird shit that we have to kind of... I think we do a good job of highlighting this, because the public either can't see this, or they also have questions, but these questions aren't being talked about to this extent. So to swing it back to a more positive vibration, I'm just going to outline some things for the Blackcaps, some reasons why they might do better in this test, and I'll like to get your thoughts on that afterwards, and we'll wrap it up there. Obviously, Trent Boult coming back is huge. I am a strong believer that the Blackcaps are a lot of people talk about their world ranking, and their place in Test cricket, which is strongly based around what they do in New Zealand, but it's also basically revolves around playing their first 11 most of the time. And so there is a big difference between the Blackcaps' first 11 and then taking out Trent Boult, for example. So having the strongest possible bowling attack is a huge plus for the Blackcaps. They are great at learning between tests, and I think you're going to see that in a nice example with Kane Williamson, who wasn't at his best in the first test, but then the journey the Blackcaps go on from Test 1 to Test 2, I believe, is going to be evident in how Kane Williamson performs in the second test. I think he's going to learn and adapt and come out and do his homework, and then come out in the second test on Boxing Day and just be better, be the Kane Williamson that we know and love. And then it's kind of, well, that's not, and then I think those are just the keys. Like, Kane Williamson will be better, and Tom Latham and Henry Nicholls don't have great records in Australia, so I think they will be better off for that experience as well. So I think with the batting lineup, you're just going to have batsmen who are slightly more comfortable with the environment, with the situation, and batting against a very good bowling attack. Like, talk about the pace attack, you've got to have some repetitions and action against Nathan Lyon if you do want to be successful against Nathan Lyon. Like, you can't just come in and face Nathan Lyon for the first, second, or third time in your career and expect to be successful. You've got to have faced Nathan Lyon. You've got to know about his angles, his plans, his variations, how he likes to get wickets and stuff like that. So I think learning from the first test will be a huge factor, and then having a full strength bowling attack is another reason why we should all be quite optimistic about what can happen in the second test.
I'm optimistic. I think, like Kane Williamson, for example, he was not that far away in that first test, to be honest. Like, the way he batted with Ross Taylor for a long period under lights in that just absolutely brutal session to start our innings, where, you know, that was masterful for a long time there, and then he just got to 30 something and made a mistake, and you know, played out one outside off stump that he shouldn't have, flipped it to gully, and Steve Smith took like a worldie of a catch. And so those are the very thin margins that you have in a situation like this. But, you know, he hung around until the end of the day's play there. We're suddenly only, 2 down instead of being 5 down at the end there. He and Taylor are both able to come in and try get set the next morning. Maybe Taylor bats a little steadier and goes on to get his 100 in that case. Maybe Williamson goes on, and it's a very different test match. I'm not saying that we could have overturned the result because it was pretty thorough as it was, but certainly that first session of our first innings, under lights, pink ball moving around, Mitchell Starc going absolutely bonkers with it, like, that, it just doesn't get more difficult than that, and we didn't handle it very well, and that was the turning point in the test match, because it's like, you know, they had already scored 400, but we still hadn't batted. You know, you can't really judge it till both teams have batted, and at that point, like, that was when the game went away, when they had runs on the board and we weren't able to respond. That's obviously, you know, no lights at the MCG to have to worry about, no pink ball to have to worry about. There'll still be a Mitchell Starc, but at least they won't have those, like, absolutely perfect conditions for them, which Australia have proven time and time again that they're the best in the world under lights. You know, they've won every day-night test they've played or something like that, I'm pretty sure. Certainly at home they have. So that helps immensely. Like, they're just not hopefully being able to get off to a slightly better start this time, and being able, like, just the conditions there being slightly more favourable. But I mean, say what you will about Tom Blundell as an opener, but G. Raval wasn't scoring runs either, so it's not like it's a net negative there. You can't get more negative than G. Raval scoring, like, I think he got 1 in each innings or something like that. So that's, you know, that's pretty much cancelled out, really. And if you look overall, therefore, I think this team is going to be the addition of Trent Boult back into this team means so much more than having Tom Blundell open could ever, erase. Trent Boult is the best bowler New Zealand has. We didn't have him last test match. We have him this test match, and he's looking pretty fired up too. He's had a good lot of rest. I think he maybe would have played that first test if it had been like the series decider, but as it was, no reason to risk him really when there's 2 more tests to come. This is the one now. This is the one. Trent Boult is back. That makes an enormous quantity of difference for the Blackcaps, and it's enough really to where we should feel a whole lot more confident about the prospects of doing something on Boxing Day.
For sure. Who's going to get the most runs from the Blackcaps in this test?
Well, it's not often that Kane Williamson goes 2 tests in a row without passing 50, so he's certainly got to be in the conversation there. I thought Ross Taylor handled the Aussie pace attack very well, and I was just talking about their partnership the two of them had, so I think Roscoe's got to be up there. But on a slightly more sneaky note, I'm not going to say Tom Blundell, but it would be nice. But Tom Latham, if he could do something and really hammer home the fact that this dude, world-class opener, like a starring innings for him, like one of those sort of career milestone type innings where you really show that you can do it wherever, like away against Australia with a quality pace attack. If he could go big, and he's the kind of guy who can have a couple low scores in one test and then come out and score a double hundred the next test. Like he does that relatively recently. He gets hundreds quite commonly, where like when he sticks in, he tends to go pretty big. And it's a matter of getting him out early to stop him from doing that. So, I don't know, I think he is as good as anyone in the Blackcaps at playing around that off stump. So this is why he's such a good opener. He's got a great forward defense and he knows when to leave the ball. Even to points where, there's even just over this summer, there've been a few where he's leaving on length and the ball swings back sharply, just a little bit too close for comfort. But he's a very good judge of those kind of things. I think Tom Latham is a guy who could be well poised to do something special, and if not in this test match, then certainly in the series. There's another one afterwards, of course, it'd be at the SCG, wouldn't it? So Tom Latham is someone who would, I'm not necessarily saying this because I think he's the guy who's definitely going to do this, but I would say he is a guy who his reputation probably stands to gain the most if he does.
Booyakasha. Merry Christmas to you, Wildcard.
Merry Christmas to you too. And to all our dear listeners.
And to our beautiful listeners around the world and around the beautiful land of Aotearoa. Stay beautiful. Kia kaha. Raise your mana. And enjoy yourselves. We'll be back for a podcast sometime. Doesn't matter when, just whenever. And you can listen. And if you are listening and you do enjoy what we're doing here at the Niche Case, jump on Patreon and support us on Patreon. Otherwise, we'll catch you on the next one. Cha-cha. Peace.